Well, they are civilians who have served in Her Majesty's forces. Army, Navy, Air Force, Royal Marines, part of the Navy. Their experiences are unique, but they're civilians. They were civilians before they started, and they're civilians afterwards, but there's this bit in the middle that for some of them can be problematic. I think there really are some urban myths in relation to veterans. They're all hardened killers, aren't they? Well, there are 140 trades in the army, for example, only one of which I think is infantry soldier. There are a large number of people who provide all sorts of support networks and work. They're not all hardened, trained killers. The other myth is that they're all the same. When we think about a soldier, we assume that someone who is a cook is equally like an SAS soldier. So there are sort of myths. We lump them all into this. They're all soldiers, they're all the same. They're not. They're vastly different. Not only that, but their experiences are very different as well.
Is it all PTSD?
I think this really is an urban myth, that if you've been in the armed forces, you must be damaged, and the problem you'll have is PTSD. This is poppycock. This is just not true. PTSD is a very serious and very treatable condition. So I'd encourage anyone to come forward, because as you've heard, it is a treatable condition. But it's not the only psychological reaction to unpleasant events. And sometimes veterans have problems directly related to their service. Sometimes they have problems after service, problems before service, and sometimes the picture is very complicated. So it's terribly important they get a really good assessment.
Who is responsible for providing the mental health care for veterans?
Well, once they have left service, the responsibility since 1948 and the inception of the National Health Service has always been the National Health Service. Lots of people say, well, we should have a Veterans Administration like the Americans. But the Americans only have a Veterans Administration because they don't have an NHS. So NHS is where you go for the expertise. And we do know in places like the Traumatic Stress Clinic here in Camden, this really is one of the best places in the world to have your post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosed and treated correctly.